going to practice on how to count atoms. So you look at this chemical formula, you need to know how many molecules there are, how many atoms are there for each element. So you can do this two different ways. I'm going to show you two different methods. Choose which one you like the best. So the first method is the drawing method. And so what we need to realize, notice how I put a 1 at the beginning. So that lets us know whenever there's no big number in the front that we have one molecule. So I'm just going to draw out this long block. And then from there, I'm just going to kind of break it down. All right, so in my molecule, Fe is my first element. This 2 is my subscript that tells me how many atoms I have of Fe, which is iron. So I'm going to put Fe twice because of that 2 right there. Then I'm going to move on to the next element. My next element is Mg, magnesium, and there's no number, so I'm going to put a 1 underneath that or behind it. And so I need to write that as well. And then my next element is Cl, which is chlorine, and then it shows 3, so I'm going to write that 3 times. 1, 2, 3. Okay, I have like this huge space, totally fine. Okay, now from here, this is what my molecule looks like. I'm just going to write out my information. So we said that iron had 2 atoms, magnesium had 1 atom, and chlorine had 3 atoms. And that is a total of 6 atoms. So you can do that like that. Or you can do it by distributing, which I'm sure you're familiar with in math class. So my biggest advice is to write down all of your elements so that way you don't get lost. So we have iron, we have magnesium, and we have chlorine. So I'm just kind of writing them to the side. And then from there, because we have one molecule of all of this, you just distribute your 1. So 1 times 2 is 2. Magnesium doesn't have 1, so 1 times 1 is 1, and 1 times 3 is 3. So really, I just took my coefficient number and I distributed it to every subscript to get my total atoms over here. So you can either do the drawing one or you can do the distributing one. You choose what is best for you. So I'm going to do this one. Again, the drawing method. That 2 represents 2 molecules, so I would draw 2 blocks. So 1 block, 2 block. And then from there, you kind of just dive in and you look at each element. So I have hydrogen, and that 2 lets me know that I should have 2 hydrogen atoms in each one, because we have 2 molecules of whatever this is. And they'll look exactly the same. Then I move on to the next element, which is carbon. And again, carbon doesn't have a subscript, so I'm going to add 1 in there. So I'll have 1 carbon atom. And again, I put it for each one. And then I move on to oxygen, and oxygen has 3. And I have to put that for each one. And from there, I just list out my atoms or elements. I have hydrogen, I have carbon, and I have oxygen. Now I need to figure out how many atoms I have of each. So that's where I just look at my drawing and I just count what we wrote or what we drew. 1, 2, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. All right, and then if I wanted to do the math way, again, I would first write down out all of the elements. So we have hydrogen, carbon, and oxygen. I like to fill in my 1 so that way I don't forget, and then I just distribute. So whenever you distribute, you have to multiply. So 2 times 2 is 4. 2 times 1 is 2, and 2 times 3 is 6. And then you add those up, you get 12 atoms. So you get to choose which one makes the most sense for you. If drawing it out like a visual representation and then counting out the atoms, that's totally fine. If you like the math way where you get to distribute your molecules. So this big 2 tells me that I have 2 molecules, and if I wanted to figure out how many atoms I have in total, that's why we multiply, because each molecule has 2 hydrogen atoms.